Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of That Gives Me Anxiety. I know I sound like I'm chipper, maybe like I'm extroverted, the kind of person that can jump out there and talk to anyone at any time. And that's true sometimes. But eventually that battery needs to be recharged. One of those introvert extroverts. As if anyone is really completely one or the other. Come on, it's a spectrum. Well, the reason why my extrovertedness is dwindling down, I had an amazing weekend. Had some friends come down to visit Jamie and I in Charleston. 2 friends I've known a very long time, and their daughter, 2-year-old baby. It was great. We hit the town, took the little lady to the aquarium, beach. We ate some great food, barbecue, seafood. It was just wonderful. It's just heartwarming to see them. Our first visitors since we moved down to Charleston, and we did it up big. And now I want to close the door, close the blinds, and watch The Office. Just have to recharge that battery. I think I'm doing all right here, though. I'm chatting as I'm saying my internal monologue outside right now. Well, yeah, just a few walks outside. Not really talking for a couple days. It'll be great. I'll be right back. Right back to where I was. Ready to drain that battery down once more. Well, I've got another amazing episode for you. In today's episode, our anxiety is caused by caring for aging parents or having your aging parents move in with you. Certainly a daunting situation from a lifestyle perspective, from a monetary perspective, from a sanity perspective. We'll grow up and live a certain way, and when you have parents coming back in, or you have to move in with your parents, it's just a collision of how people want to live their lives. But it has to happen sometimes. And to help talk about it, I had my good friend Elvira Ibragimova come on and talk about her anxiety related to potentially having to care for her aging parents. Nothing's imminent there, but the possibility remains, and it's good. It's something good to be thinking about. So Elvira was very open and honest about her family story coming from Uzbekistan over to the United States as political refugees, and just all the things that her parents did for her, things that she's still realizing that they did for her, and how appreciative she is of them and for them. But then also being nervous that she'd have to have them move in. And that's not a knock. It's just, it is. So yeah, I'm ready to get to that interview. Just want to remind you that if you're liking the show, to please rate and review it. And to check the show out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And without further ado, I never say that right. Let's get to Elvira, aka Soup. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy. Now joining me on the podcast is my friend Elvira Ibragimova, who I usually just call Soup. Elvira is a director and a graduate of the Harold Ramis Film School. Elvira, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. And you can call me Soup on this podcast. It'll make me...
I don't have to lie. Yeah.
No, it makes me so happy. So just do it. No one ever does it anymore.
I still like that nickname.
Oh, it's the best nickname. It's like so simple, and like I love a nickname where it's like, oh, how'd you get that nickname? It's like, I just really like soup, And it's like, that's it. There's no big story.
Oh, well, Elvira and I know each other from doing improv, and I think you just got the nickname because you came to like 2 weeks in a row with a soup.
Yeah.
If we waited till the summer, you could be called like pizza.
Because we started the season in like January.
Right.
And it was, I'd always be sneaking out of work. So I would leave at like the last possible minute, and I would race uptown or to Midtown, and the only thing on the way was a Pret, and they would just always have a tomato basil soup because it was like 6:30, and that was like the only thing left.
Yeah, sneaking out for your vices of soup and long form improv.
Yeah. And I remember like days that they had this lentil soup. I was like, oh, lentil soup, it's still there. Today's going to be a good day. And then I'd walk in, and it'd be like 2 audience members instead of 1. And be like, I knew it. I knew today was going to be a great day.
Well, in this episode, we are talking about something that gives you anxiety, which is eventually having your parents move in with you, which I think a lot of people our age are nervous about.
Hmm.
I want you to tell me a little bit about your parents and what it was like growing up with them.
So I grew up in Uzbekistan. My family, we are refugees, political refugees. I was born in 1986, so the first 5 years of my life it was the Soviet Union, and obviously like the next 5 years were like there was a lot of upheaval, but the culture is generally this Soviet Russian culture.
Okay.
And then we moved to America when I was 10 in 1996. And so I can speak Russian. I remember a lot of things. It's not like I left when I was a baby. You know, I can definitely communicate with my parents, obviously, but
They speak
they're
Russian at home?
yeah.
Okay.
And my mom speaks English pretty well because she ended up working in an office in the States for a long time. But my dad, not so much because he's more like he works with computers. So he just didn't have as much of exposure to like speaking English every day.
Just
So
speaks Russian and binary.
yeah. He's just beep beep booping at us all day. Yeah, so there is a cultural, just a huge rift between us in terms of we are able to speak the same language, but not really because they were in their 40s when they moved here. I mean, it's hard to say that they didn't acclimate because we lived in New York City, and in New York City it just allows you to not acclimate if you don't want to. It's like
Right.
there's so many Russian speakers and
There's
they have
patches
their
of
like
every culture
yeah,
on the
and
planet there. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean it's kind of wonderful because they're not like not contributing members of society, but it's hard for some people to like leave in the prime of their adulthood. They both had great jobs back there, and it was more just about the fact that my mom is Jewish, my dad is Muslim, both Jews and Russian people like started to be like less and less welcome in this country.
Mm.
I remember my mom recently telling me that just overnight, all of a sudden, it seemed like it wasn't like her home anymore. Like all the
It's got to
all
be
the
so scary.
yeah, like she was all the street signs were all of a sudden in Uzbek and English, and Uzbekistan itself was a melting pot. They didn't speak Uzbek or English.
Hmm.
These are not things I ever noticed myself. I feel like I've had a pretty wonderful childhood, but recently talking to her, I'm like realizing why were refugees and like
Right.
what they were running from. And I used to think that we just lucked out, but it was really just on paper. And I was like, oh yeah, we just won the lottery. And then that was such a stupid thing to think because when talking to my mom, I'm like, oh yeah, they weren't welcome there anymore. On top of speaking Russian, it was like she was also Jewish. That was
Just running from
not
a lot of scary things. So it's really brave and also really
yeah.
scary.
And if somebody asked me right now to move to literally any other country, even Canada, I'd be like, oh my God, no, I can't. That's terrifying. I'd have to start over. No, no, thank you. And they did it with two kids, an elderly parent in tow. So, like, we moved here with my mom's parents, and my grandpa actually passed away, like, en route
Oh
to
no.
America. We stopped in Moscow for a couple of weeks to wait for a special plane that was able to accommodate them. And then he got sick in that month and passed away. It was like tragic.
That must
So
have
my
been.
grandma
Oh,
was
I'm so
like,
sorry to hear that.
yeah, it was it was really sad. Obviously, as I'm laughing and saying it, it was so sad. I mean, I think like the real tragedy was that my grandma was now like alone and not alone, but without her husband in this country.
Right. The person that was holding her hand through her whole life, presumably,
Yeah,
and at one of the scariest moments of her life, he's not there.
exactly. We came here and we lived in a one bedroom apartment in the projects in Far Rockaway, and we were on welfare, and my mom was cleaning houses and my dad was doing some other like, you know, just like the jobs that you have to do to survive.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just
I say yeah, like I would ever what was in their predicament.
I mean,
Yeah.
like I think I didn't realize until to me it was like totally I mean, it was like this huge upheaval, but it was like totally normal. And I was like, oh yeah, that's fine that we're living five people in a one bedroom. It's fine. I don't feel uncomfortable or anything. Even though we had moved from like a four-bedroom apartment in Uzbekistan and we went to this, but I was like, it's totally fine. It's only now that I'm an adult and I have all these comforts that I've acquired that I
Mm. Yeah.
now would be like so loath to give up that
Right.
now I'm like, oh my God, me and Sam right now are, yes, it's quarantine, but in general, we have this small 1-bedroom apartment in LA. And
Hmm.
I constantly feel like, oh, I wish we had more space. We're driving each other crazy, and we have these 2 cats. And this apartment is so much bigger than the apartment that I lived in with 4 other people at 10 years old, and
Yeah.
it's just how far have I come where I'm like this pampered, and I'm not even pampered because I'm like, then you walk around and you look at how some other people are living,
Yeah.
and we live in Los Feliz, and there's these gorgeous houses. They're so huge, and you know that they're like single family homes. They're giant, and I'm just like,
Hmm.
what do these people do with all this space? And meanwhile, I'm like, I guess going back to what this the topic of this podcast, if I had to fit a 70-year-old woman in this apartment right now and a hospital bed and take care of her, I would just be like, no, I'm not
Yeah.
doing it. I think I would fight so hard to not do it. And they have 0 options. So I'm
Well,
just, ugh.
yeah, that I completely, I'm with you. I did a little bit of research leading up to this and found some statistic. Obviously, your parents are a unique, or not necessarily unique. They faced a different set of challenges than the average quote unquote boomer. But according to a New York Times article, as much as 45% of baby boomers have 0 saved for retirement, which is just so astounding to me that level of people, again, your parents uprooting completely from a different country and starting completely over, but the fact that many boomers don't have a penny to their name when it comes to retirement. The case of parents moving back in with their millennial children is certainly growing, and this is a problem that like our generation is going to have to handle. Especially making that worse is that our generation is sandwiched with student loan debt and then caring for their adult parents, and earnings have remained flat for 50 years in terms of salary growth. There's just a lot to be concerned with that. And so I think it's absolutely normal to have this concern, especially when you're like, man, I don't have the space for people. And you should probably go into what you do for a living too, to talk about as a freelancer, you'd be adding caring for your aging parents to finding jobs, doing jobs. I mean, as a freelancer, you have 2 jobs, one being just searching for jobs.
It's funny because even knowing those statistics, and sometimes I tell myself those statistics because I like to be like, oh, you're not alone. But then it's just, I don't know if that even helps me, because it's like in retrospect, knowing all the statistics of all those people who like got hit in the 2008 crisis doesn't
Right.
lessen the fact that they all suffered and no one really helped out. And the student loan thing is like,
Depressing.
It's so depressing. Sometimes I think about it like, I try to think about it really objectively, because my mom, I can hear how much pain it brings her to not have been able to pay for school. No matter how many times you brought me to America. You gave me like the most incredible life I could have.
Highlighting what you said before about you feeling cushy. I mean, it's the idea of one generation works harder so that you can experience an easier life.
Yeah. And the thing is, I've thrown a huge wrench into that by switching careers.
You were an architect, and now
Yeah.
Elvira quit her architecture job and moved to Chicago and then ultimately to LA to pursue her directing career. And I'm sure there was a little bit of judgment maybe there.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I will say that despite the stereotypes of immigrant parents, my mom has always encouraged me to be artistic.
Oh, that's great.
When I told her I was doing architecture, she was like, I don't think you should do this. I think you should be a children's book illustrator, something. Like, she could tell that I liked creating happy, whimsical things. And I was more like, oh, no, I need to have a stable, steady career. Because I had it was kind of like a reverse thing of like, my immigrant mother didn't want me to be a doctor, lawyer, or architect. I mean, they were very proud that I was an architect. Obviously, that saddled me with 8 years of school and like 8 years of student loans, which they were not able to help out with. And again, like I was saying before, I'm just grateful that they allowed me to even be in this country. Right now, when I think about being in Uzbekistan, which I don't know if you know the situation there, but it wouldn't be that fun for me to be there right now. And like, I'm always like, okay, so whatever, I'll take the student loans over that whole other alternate universe where I don't even know what, like
Right.
oppressed and like,
Here and yeah.
yeah. And
The California sunshine feels a lot better.
yeah, for sure. When I started architecture, and this, I also want to go back and say that even if I had stuck with architecture, what I've realized from like doing it, like being in school for 4 years and I'm practicing for 4 years, it doesn't pay that well. The people who make money off of architecture are, just like in every other profession, the people who started out with money. The price it takes to start your own firm, have insurance, be able to like, it's the same type of barrier of like seed money that prevents most like underrepresented communities from entering these kind of like exalted fields.
Right.
So I think a lot of people are like, oh, you left this steady career to do this other thing. And I'm like, really, in the grand scheme of things, like it doesn't make a fucking difference. The thing that really is preventing me from ever gaining wealth is not having wealth in the first place. It's not the choices that I've made. And
Amen. Amen. That's great advice. Yeah.
And so I'm just like, why not just do what makes me happy? I will say that obviously at first, totally understandably, my parents had misgivings about me doing all that improv and making fart videos on the weekends with my friends. I don't even think at some point I just gave up trying to like sell them on it, because I'm like, I just got to do it. They'll never understand. And there's a part of me that is like, I don't even understand if this is the right thing.
Yeah.
Being in a fairy tutu in Prospect Park on a rainy day and telling myself this is the right thing to do is like really, really hard.
That felt right. What Elvira is referencing is a web series that she had written that we filmed where her and I and Laura Hankin performed as fairies.
Yeah.
In a, how would you describe it? Like whimsical tale of fairy godparents.
Yeah, it was like fairy godparents to a depressed millennial.
But what it like turned out to be is like wearing a tutu around Bushwick. And I got a lot of support, which is very heartwarming to hear a grown man walking around dressed as a fairy. So many people were just like, okay, that's great.
That's what I love about New York. You're probably not even in the top 10 weirdest people that they saw that day.
Right.
You know? I think because, okay, I'm going to try to assess my accomplishments without constantly apologizing for them right now.
Don't apologize.
But like, I think that what I've done since deciding to become a director, it's gone well. I got a fellowship at Nickelodeon. I secured my first TV directing episode. Obviously, COVID right now has put that on pause, but I have a TV episode coming up. I've worked really hard to become a good writer, and that has it feels so uncomfortable to say this, but I'm just gonna keep talking. It's attracted people into my corner, which is my measure of success.
You're crushing it. It's great. Yeah.
Thank you. But I think my parents are seeing that, and they see that I'm not gonna end up homeless just because I've gone into this very, very speculative, very exclusionary career. I think that they see that I am ready to make money in this career from any angle, and I'm also very lucky to have multiple skills right now to fall back on. My illustration, like graphic design, like all this stuff that I had before architecture, and then architecture helped me like solidify all of those skills. Right. And I live in a time where, for better or worse, that is celebrated by this society and exploited, of course, but also there's so many tools and vehicles for me to be a freelancer while I pursue this very epic career. So
keep snacking till you get dinner.
Exactly. Yeah. And so my mom is, I can see that that just as proud of me doing the directing thing as they were with architecture. I think obviously she worries about health insurance and stuff like that, but who doesn't,
right,
I'm not the only, like, even if there's people with stable careers with the shittiest
people
health
just
insurance.
getting laid off too, right? Left and right here too. So nothing feels secure.
But being like, yes, you're doing the right thing. And I wish I could exist in my mind in a vacuum of that ego that you kind of need to be a director, where I wish I could just in my mind be like, you're doing the right thing because you're talented and you just need to work hard at whatever cost. But like, I can just like, I can't shake off the guilt of, because you've taken this turn and you've set yourself back 10 years and you've entered this very speculative career, you won't be able to pay off your loans as quickly and you won't be able to take care of your parents. And like now they're in their, my dad is turning 70 in like 2 weeks and I'm at the beginning of a directing career, which is like completely a huge gamble.
Right.
And I look around and I see other people who, as a creative, I look down on them and I'm like, oh, it's like those people who are just like working boring jobs and like, you know, but then as like a regular person, I'm so envious of them for like being able to buy a house at 30 and having those 4 extra rooms in the house where they're like, if my mom needs to move in with me, I can take care of her. Like, I wish that I could just live in a bubble where
you can pursue your creative ideas while also giving back to your parents, because clearly they were supportive and got you into a much safer environment and really set you up on a path to have this ability to choose. So I empathize with the idea of you feeling guilty that you may not be able to reciprocate.
Yeah, they gave up their, as much as the country was in turmoil and stuff, it was still their home. And it's like where they felt like confident adults in their prime who, you know, the way that you and I feel right now, like we're the king of our dominion here because we know it. As much as things are uncertain, I know how to walk through this world with confidence. Right. And they gave that up. And they essentially gave that to me. Now I walk through the world with confidence because of them. And I wish I could I fantasize about buying them a house. I fantasize about that the way that people fantasize about having a threesome with supermodels. Like it's just like
it's like, oh yeah, mom, and it's gonna have bay front windows and a finished basement.
And a hedge outside so you don't have to look at anyone because you just want to sit. I daydream about that. And it's, as much as I take a step back and I'm like, I'm not alone in having those desperate, impossible daydreams. I know that other people are saddled with ridiculous student loan debt. I know that other people are like, rent is so high, and our generation is, a lot of us have moved to cities where you're living in like shoebox apartments because that's where all of the opportunities are. I know that there's millions and millions of us, but the thing that just really gets me is, but no one has a solution. Like no one has a solution to how millennials are, who, by the way, so many millennials are moving in with their parents right now. There's not even going to be that gap.
Part of my research was finding that on top of the amount of millennials that were moving back in their parents before COVID, there are statistics that show 35 to 50% of millennials that were out are moving back with their parents for the time being to create a safer location, right? Like a lot of people are leaving New York City to Long Island or whatever state or country that they're from to get a little bit more space. Like we're sitting here in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, and you know, we have our little apartment and we live in an apartment building, of course, which increases our exposure. And so, there's just a lot of people flooding back home to their parent for that safety net.
And that kind of just is one step closer to like closing the loop. I'm born, I live with my parents until I want to have my own life. And then I have my own life for like 15, 20 years. And then my parents move back in with me. But that window is getting smaller and smaller because there's 35-year-olds living with their parents who are coming up on 70, you know? So, and on the one hand, I'm like, well, that's how people in the village lived in the 1500s. You have your family home and people just cycle out of that house. I think that I swung onto like my cultural pendulum has swung too far to where I'm like, I'm American and I don't want to live with my parents.
I don't go to laundromats. I ride water slides, and my parents do not live with me. I am American. What the
I'm
voice sounds
American.
very un-American or
I am American. Okay.
yeah.
My first thing is I love the water slides.
The Burger
my,
King.
my second thing is I love the Gretchen Wieners from my favorite movie, Mean Girls.
All right, let's see how long it takes for me to find news that doesn't give me anxiety. Typing in news into Google. Oh, there's a death right off the bat. People fighting. Some other virus. There's things are on fire. Oh my gosh, misinformation. Oh God. I shouldn't have done this. Oh God. Oh, stores are closing. Oh, even the sports coverage is really negative about who's been the worst performer at training camp. Okay, here's an article just talking about the fleet of ships the U.S. has in its Navy. Doesn't give me anxiety, that is just a statement of facts. It took me 7 pages Googling news to find that. There we go. Oh, look at that boat. In the Navy. There we go. Just an update on the ships that we have. Well, today's episode is brought to you by My Software Tutor. Can Excel be my friend? Many people have wondered this for years. The answer is yes, it can. Oh man, now that I'm in this pit of anxiety and extrovert levels are low, just have anxiety about everything. Anything. I'm joking, but it's true. So I guess I'm not joking. You ever get those days when you worry that people aren't actually your friends, that they're just pretending? That's the worst. Oh, I need a blanket. I need Steve Carell. Give me The Office. The Office behind Peacock paywall is just war crimes. War crimes. My Software Tutor offers 3 levels of real-time Zoom-based courses with a live instructor. You start thinking about things from 3rd grade that you said. Why are we this mean to ourselves? They all deliver practical, functional business skills in a friendly, supportive environment. What if the My Software Tutor teacher doesn't like me? Oh God. These courses will increase your marketability, whether you're an employee, job seeker, consultant, or contractor. Then you start wondering if you're not going to be able to learn this. I need to recharge the batteries. Anxiety's taken over, like the nothing from the Neverending Story. Register at mysoftwaretutor.com and use the promo code POD20 to save 20% off all registrations. Just need to read some more articles about the boats that we have in our naval fleet. That'll solve it. Today's episode is also brought to you by Garnished Entertainment. Are you missing your friends? Well, it was nice to really see some friends. So yeah, you also get that sadness right after people leave, or I do. I don't know. I've described it to Jamie a few times, and she's been like, "What?" Yeah, when I leave people, when I leave my family, and I don't know when I'm going to see them again, I get sad. It's not fun. Not a fun feeling. Tired of unwinding in front of the TV? Losing your marbles ever so slightly? Yes. As always, yes. 1,000,000 times yes. Shake up your night with a Garnished virtual cocktail event. Garnished Entertainment is a New York City-based mixology event company with the mission of bringing communities together through creative and entertaining virtual cocktail classes. Find out if you're really friends with people. Invite them to a Garnished event. Pose the question. Get the host to do it for you. Hey, Steve, do you actually like him? Just right there. At least you'll have a cocktail waiting for you. And you'll know. You'll know, and you'll be able to move forward with your life. Whether you're catching up with old friends, finding out if friends actually like you. That's not part of the copy. But team building with colleagues, or looking for the perfect date night, Garnished would love to be your host. Let's garnish. All right, back to soup.
I think I also have these delusions of grandeur to where I'm like, I'm not normal. I'm not like everyone else. I
I'm the
need my
star of this movie.
Exactly, right? I think that a lot of creatives get that way. And I'm not, as much as I want to pretend I'm a humble little individual, I have an ego And the more I've gotten into this career, the more I've nurtured that ego and created a lifestyle to where I'm like, if I want to write 10 pages a day, my brain needs to be pampered, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it needs to be happy and serene so I can just explore ideas because my ideas are so great and I'm the best and I'm like
And
the
creativity doesn't
smartest.
come out until you're fed and you feel comfortable and the temperature's right and you know that you're
Yeah.
loved and all these other things.
Yeah. And one of the other things is I need peace. I need
Yeah.
peace in my home. And I know me and my parents, and I know this is not any different from me than any other kid, no matter how old you are. Your parents being in the same space as you is goodbye peace. You don't have it anymore. You know,
No,
it's like
you don't.
even if you have the loveliest relationship with your parents, to them, you as an individual, like don't really exist. You're a part of them. They own you. They own you and your space and all your thoughts. When I'm home, my mom just she'll walk into any conversation you have.
Dinner's at 6. You better be there. What's going on?
Yeah, or she's like already shoving a spoon of something for you to try. And I know how I sound. I'm complaining about these actually lovely things that I'm sure I'll miss when they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody goes through this. Everyone's like, oh yeah, mama, she's so annoying.
You secretly love it a little bit. Yeah.
I love it in small chunks. I love it so I could,
Leave it.
just get it all in one time period and then go off and like ruminate on it and like treat it as like an event rather than my whole life. When I think about living with my parents and everything that I think is annoying about them or wrong with them being heightened because of age, because of old age, because they're only going to get worse, I get really, really scared and I get ridiculously anxious. And a part of me is like, I'm a nice person pretty much
I'm so
the
nice.
rest of
I
my life.
swear I'm a nice person.
But I'm sure my temper runs so hot with my parents. I just turn into this monster little devil child. My mom and when we're talking, it's like at a yell the entire time because she's interrupting and I'm like, don't interrupt. And you can't teach an old person to change how they act. And I'm like, yes, I can.
Is that really
Are
her
you dead?
response? That's amazing.
She's
I'm
like,
old. I get to do this.
yeah, she's like, I can't stop interrupting. That's my habit. Go back and teach baby me to like not do that. But it is what it
That
is, you
is
know?
the most hilarious way to deflect. All right, you want me to change? Get a time machine,
Get a time
go
machine,
back in
go back.
time, find
Yeah.
me, and teach me. And then I'll
Yeah.
know it.
And then she'll just be like, okay, I'll stop interrupting. I'll do it. And then I'll be like, okay, what I was going to say is boom, interrupt. And the thing is, I'm 34 and I was just like this at 15. I remember thinking, oh, well, when you become an adult, you learn how to control your temper with your parents and
Mm-hmm.
and you stop getting annoyed at them. And now I'm like, I don't think that's ever going to happen. I hate myself for doing it
Of
because
course, because they've done
like
they've done everything.
she deserves her kids to worship her and
Right.
kiss the ground that she walks on for what she has done for us and what she continues to do for us. And yet what she has is bucko of a daughter who moved away to LA and every time they talk there's at least a 15-minute period where we're just at each other's throats and I know it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
And if I had to write the perfect scenario, I'd be like, oh, I'm a really good daughter who in my parents' old age gives them like the most comfortable old age possible, just like make it all about them.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I'm not going to do that. I know I'm going to be like a stressed out, yelly little shit cake of a kid. And I'm already mourning the loss of my peace and this person that I like to think I am, which is this level-headed, cool, funny person that people like being around. And I'm like, that person is just going to die.
If your parents move in, that person is dead. I can't quite put my finger on why that is. I think it's just your parents have an ability to get through the crack. If you view yourself as like a wooden box, they can get in there and break the wooden box and suddenly you're 14 again. And
yes, they have the power to infantilize you
Yeah.
and undo everything that you think you've built up about your personality. You saw that Wall Street Journal article that they did like a profile on me.
Mm-hmm.
I remember just being like, because I've gotten a lot of people writing to me after that article, and
What, like friends
uh,
or people, readers?
random people.
Oh God.
Some of them have been really funny, but a few of them have been like, oh my gosh, this is great, I look up to you. And I'm like, yeah, that's how it should be. Like, I want to be a person that like people look up to. I want to do the things that like inspire others. And then I'm just like, yeah, but then there's that thing that no matter how big I think I get as a human being, no matter how adult I become, if anyone at like the Wall Street Journal or anyone at like any place where I eventually hopefully get accolades could just see me talking to my mom for 15 minutes, they would see that I'm a total fucking child that doesn't deserve to be in charge of a set with 50 crew members. And
Yeah.
it's just
You just turn
like,
into like a talent screaming
yes,
about like not having the right donut or whatever, or your
I think
space.
that's what I'm afraid of. Financially, I can't give them the space or the comfort that they deserve. But B, there's also this monster coming that is
Lurking,
me.
always
Yeah.
under
Yes.
under the
Like,
surface, just waiting.
because they're the same. They think they're fine.
Right.
And you know what? They're probably right.
Yeah.
Old people deserve to do whatever the fuck they want. And it's me, I'll be losing myself. And all of this will be undone. And I feel so selfish saying this, but my only hope is that my sister does it instead of me. Like, I hate saying this because, and I know she knows I think it. She's the older sister and she's always been way more responsible, and she's the heart of our family. She's got more empathy than anybody I know in the world, and I look up to her and I love her so much. She's my hero. And yet also selfishly, I'm like, oh yeah, thank God
She'll
she's so
take the fall.
empathetic.
Yeah.
She'll take the hit. And that's awful. She doesn't deserve that either.
I
She
think it's
has
just very honest. I don't think it's awful. I think it
it
is what it is. Like
yeah.
Trump likes to say about people dying of COVID. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Well, you may know that I grew up with my grandma in my house, in a multi-generational house. What happened was my grandpa and her saved a bunch of money and were really smart about their retirement, except for one move. They moved from New York to Pennsylvania with the idea that they would retire in the woods and live this calm, relaxed life after my grandpa worked in Wall Street and finance for many years. They got a place in the Poconos, and then what they did was they opened a video store. So they put all of their retirement savings into a video store, which
Oh,
unfortunately didn't end up working out. My grandpa ended up passing away at the age of 51, 52, and all the money was tied up in the video store. So at age 51, my grandma had nothing and had to move in with my parents. And then
wait,
growing up,
51 is so young.
so young. Might have been 55, but still well below what we think of as retirement age.
Yeah.
Right. It just shows like how well they were planning, and just, I hate to be rude to them, but how poorly the decision to open a video store was, because they could have taken part-time jobs or invested, or just like starting their own business that fails killed all of their retirement savings, especially the passing of my grandfather. So she really just got what she could from selling that business, which wasn't much, and had to move in with my parents around that age. And I know that was really hard on my parents, and everything you're describing, sense of self goes away, have to care for this person for the rest of her life. And then from
Which at 51 is a lot of life.
it ended up being 30 years. That's a
That's
long
our
time.
whole life.
Yeah.
Like,
If you think about my mom lived from obviously birth through getting married. I think they got married around 21 or 2 about.
dang.
And then
The 80s were a different time.
yeah, right. Yeah. You imagine being I hadn't even gotten to the improv phase of my life at that age.
When I meet somebody who's 21, I'm like, you need to go back and gestate some more.
Yeah, you're not finished.
And if
Not
they're
done.
married, I'm like, I have nothing, no advice for you. Sorry.
No, you've done it perfectly. Great.
Yeah, wow.
Great job.
Can you tell me what I did wrong?
Right. But growing up with my grandma in the house, at times it felt like having a third parent. And at other times it felt like there were 4 kids. She teetered with her level of authority from fighting against my parents to fighting against the kids. Just created a really interesting dynamic. And I know it caused stress for both my parents and for my sisters. But
Yeah, like not knowing who's in charge. Not that
oh yeah.
anybody needs to be in charge, but what you're saying, that level of authority, which especially when you're trying to raise a young kid, you need to be unquestioned.
Well, like my grandma would never eat vegetables. So like how do you have 3 kids eat vegetables?
Why didn't you mention that when you were talking about bad decisions?
Right. Very bad decision. There was one thing I remember my mom making. It was some meat with cheese on top and it had broccoli sprinkled in the cheese. My grandma like meticulously went and got every bit of broccoli out of that.
Oh my
So she
God.
wouldn't incidentally eat it. She just didn't think she had to. She's like, I'm old. I'm not eating something I don't want to eat.
Yeah. Speaking from your grandma's side, that's her sense of self. Like
Yeah.
as annoying and like kooky as we attribute those things. If I don't like vegetables when I'm 50, I don't want to start having to eat vegetables because someone else is expecting me to.
It's exhausting. Yeah.
And I think that's the most devastating thing for me, is like putting myself in those people's shoes, because then it's like this undefeatable foe.
Mhm.
Because in their mind, in our minds, we're all right. We're all like the protagonist in our own story. And like,
Right.
I don't know who I'm rooting for in that situation. Your poor mom who like slaved over a dish that sounds delicious and she was probably excited to serve it to people, or this lady who's like, oh fuck, she put broccoli in my thing. She knows I don't like, it's like,
Yeah. I gotta be here. I gotta be tortured too.
yeah. Oh man, my husband died and left me with nothing, and now I'm sitting here having to fucking pick out broccoli out of this cheese, like after I gave birth to this woman. And then
Right.
on the other hand, when I make a meal and Sam is like not immediately at the table to eat it when it's in its perfect state, I get livid. If I saw him picking broccoli out of something, I'd be like, who the fuck do you think you are? Excuse me, like,
Oh,
oh,
the class
Mr.
on
Too Good
you.
for Broccoli. I mean, he would never do that. He would just like garbage disposal everything in the plate. But like my parents are also like I know their eating habits, and it's going to be really hard to accommodate their eating habits, because what they're used to is their Uzbeki meals, and
Mhm.
with a mixture of an Americanized version of that here, because they
Uzbeki
live
fusion, nice.
but it's not the good kind of fusion. It's the weird fucking like, what is
Like
this?
what?
I don't know. Like she puts like Swiss cheese and melts it on pate on really dark bread, and
Interesting.
and then she'll be like, oh, I should have a vegetable. And then it's like, oh, I can't, I'm not even explaining this right. And I can feel myself getting angry right now.
I can see you getting angry.
Because I'm back and trying to explain to her why, just eat a meal, just eat a normal thing. This
Have some
is
chicken pot
something.
pie.
Yeah, and she'll be like, "Oh no,
Come
I
on,
couldn't."
eat it.
Like no. Oh my God, what are you, crazy? My dad, who has had in the past 5 years, has had a quadruple bypass. Like
Oh man.
needs to have a pile of oily meat every day. Like that's his thing. And we're like,
Honey, could
okay,
you pass the oil?
could you pass the tube of fat, please? And so we also have to be like, all right, so I mean, he's definitely gonna have to have another quadruple bypass probably in a couple of years, because he eats like a garbage truck. And thing is, back to that sense of self, that's what they want to eat. And
Right.
they're adults and they've earned it, just like I'm an adult and I've earned my peace or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just so, there's no winner, everyone's a loser.
Ooh, that's kind of dark, but I think it's true. With this podcast, for the most part, I'm trying to demystify a lot of things, but there are certain things like this that don't have a clear answer, that a clear way of like making things seem a little bit scary, except for the fact that, like, looking back on times that were really stressful living in a multi-generational house are now such fond memories.
Yeah.
And we laugh about them. And I think growing up in a multi-generational family or home, it made me more patient. It made me a better listener. I have a lot more empathy, I think, from that experience. So I think even, if it does wind up happening to you, I think in the long run, even though it'll be stressful as hell, eventually there'll be learning opportunities, and
Yeah,
you'll look back at
and
it
I
with
mean, you're
fondness.
right. Every time I hang up with my mom, I'm immediately flooded with love for her, and I get these micro doses of nostalgia in my brain to where I'm like, I already miss this phone call with her, where I wish things had been different and I hadn't yelled at her. I guess I'm just describing regret, but it's I love my mom so much. My dad and I have a much more distant relationship, but it's really, so I guess when I think of the household, I think of my mom is the person, like she's the anchor. And
Mhm.
I think you're right. I look back and I grew up with my grandma too, and I don't have any bad memories of her. I only have good, like what you're saying, like patience and this like sweet presence there. Somebody
Mhm.
who's there to like love you, right? But
Mhm.
then I think about, that's not going to be me in that situation. I'm going to be my mom in that situation,
Right.
who it was her mother-in-law, but my mom and dad in that situation, to where you're like
Oh yeah, in this example too, my
stuck.
parents were constantly stressed.
Yeah, that's the thing. And the thing is, the one lucky thing that I know is I don't want kids. So
Mhm.
I'm not going to be trapped in the middle of two very precarious relationships that I have to balance.
Mhm.
So I know that I'm a little bit off the hook and very lucky with that, even though my mom wouldn't agree. She really wants those babies coming out soon. But I think it's more wanting to make your parents happy because you love them so much, but just knowing that the very thing that will make them happy is also the thing that
You
will
can't give them.
take away your sense of self.
Yeah.
And that's just a separate thing from finances.
Well,
But it's,
hold on.
I
Let's
mean,
think.
I don't want you to think that I'm this is like therapy, so it's good to even
Yeah.
say this stuff out loud, because I think a lot of people don't. And I keep ending on these like really depressing
Well,
notes, but I don't want you to.
let me end it on this. Retirement savings, there's a lot of ways to improve your finances and a lot of education out there to try to save for situations like this and set up yourself up for retirement. It's never too late to improve that. And so I would really encourage people to do some research and try to
Don't open a video store in Pennsylvania.
don't open a video store in Pennsylvania. Netflix has that covered. And just try to take advantage of resources that are out there. Make sure you're saving for retirement at any age, paying off credit card debt, whatever you have.
I don't have any credit card debt, so it's really more the student loans. And I'm kind of just waiting to see how that whole thing plays out. I could get so much different advice from people on student loans. There's some
Yeah.
people who I feel like take a very fuck it anarchist approach. Like there's no benefits to paying them all off in one lump sum.
Hmm.
Because I feel like there's this social, societal like celebration of like, I've paid off my loans, I'm free,
Hmm.
but I think that's bullshit. I think that's just like something that we're fed to be
We're
like,
imagining
yeah, to
that
like,
moment. Yeah.
yeah, but I bet I'll be really sad when I pay off all my loans, because I'll start to think about all the money that I didn't get to keep.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, in terms of savings and retirement, it's kind of scary to think of stories like your grandparents, because, and I'm sure everybody's like hyper aware of it now with COVID. You don't know what will happen. You can be as prepared as you want.
And the 2008 crash destroyed 401k retirement savings for a lot of boomers, going back to the 45% of boomers who have zero saved for retirement.
And just like how ill-equipped this country is to give out healthcare, and the elderly are like
Yeah.
at most at the highest risk of, they need to be who's going to take care of them?
That's a
Like
great question.
we can give them the kind of care that you and I have been discussing, emotional and having a place to live, but I didn't even think about healthcare.
That's a tremendous cost on top of that. Yeah. Well, I think it's just making sure you vote and paying attention to your elections and fighting
Oh
for
yeah.
that type of care.
If they want to live with me, they got to hoof their asses out to California because there's good healthcare here.
Well, just the sun and the sand and the
The
air out
vitamin
there.
D. Ooh. Well,
Yeah.
a couple of earthquakes here, a couple of mudslides here. So what? Big deal. You got free dental. You know?
Exactly. Free dental and all the free marijuana you could smoke.
That's right. That's what I want to leave everybody with. If you move to California, there's just free marijuana everywhere on the streets. It's not a problem. We're all very happy about it.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me and being open about this. And
Yeah,
I can't wait
thank
to
you.
watch you, whatever you're going to end up creating. I know there's a lot of uncertainty because of COVID, but you have a lot of things lined up and very excited for you.
I am writing a feature based on my parents. So what you said about having good memories is always a good thing to keep in mind, especially for creatives. It's all fodder that you could use in your stuff.
Just like when you used to do improv and an uncle would say, "Oh, watch what you say. He's going to put you in the show."
Yeah. It's like, well, now you're in the show, Uncle.
Yeah.
For saying that.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, I just want to stress that it isn't a knock on parents. Like Elvira wasn't coming down hard. It's tough. I mean, some people really, really get along with their parents, but it's different when you're gonna live with them. You kind of revert back to who you were, and sometimes they don't see you entirely as the adult that you've become. I'm very lucky in that regard with my parents, but that's not for everyone. I just want to thank Soupy. Keep your eyes out for her work as a director. I don't want to speak for her or overstep boundary, but she's got some exciting projects coming out, and I'm really happy for her. All right, let's get to the Anxiety Hall of Fame. This week I chose Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, which I guess is a little bit of a controversial call, right? They're nervous about everything. But they're usually right. There usually is like a ghost or a ghoul that's going to chase them around for 22 minutes, Like anxiety by definition is a misfiring of your fight or flight response. And they needed that. They were running and hiding. I think the rest of them were just in denial. Oh, stop it. You're crazy, Shaggy and Scooby. Now go down in that dungeon in this abandoned building. I mean, we should also say they were very likely extraordinarily high. You're gonna tell me Scooby and Shaggy with that level of anxiety and that need to snack weren't on edibles? Come on, let's not lie to ourselves. So yeah, best friends Scooby and Shaggy, Anxiety Hall of Fame. Well, team, as promised, I think it's time for me to find some Office episodes, grab a blanket, eat comfort food. I need healthy stuff. Oh my gosh. And recharge those batteries. Anyway, take care of yourselves. I want to mention my other podcast, Death Space Filling the Void. Check that out anywhere you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.